All right, so we'll be back again, episode 2. My name is Jay Cruz.
And I'm Austin Tokar.
And today, I know last week, our first episode, we were kind of all over the place. Part of that was to introduce ourselves, kind of talk about our life, how we know each other, we're brothers. But this week, we want to stay on one topic. And I think this is a topic that I think everybody struggles with at some point in their life, and there's very little guidance that is like hard factual, because it's different. One, it's different for everybody, and then two, everybody says something different. So we're going to be talking about diet today. What are some of the points that you wanted to hit specifically on diet?
You know, there seems to be this cult idea that only one way works for everybody, right? But obviously that's not true, because we have a multitude of routes that we can go that's worked for a multitude of different people. There's like this stigma that you have to do it this way. And I get it. Some of it's branding, right? You know, you have Liver King, you have, Sean Baker. You know, you have to eat all the meat. You got to be carnivore. You'll reap these benefits from it, and you have low inflammation, all this good stuff. But, you know, that kind of builds this cult following that's not healthy in a way.
I've actually noticed, so in terms of like diets, I've never followed like a specific, I followed multiple specific diets, but specifically when I started keto, there was some other fitness person. I don't even want to say her name because I don't even want to give her any kind of press, but she was just talking about how keto didn't work because she had a product that was like opposite of what keto was at the time.
Yeah.
So she wasn't like into it. She wasn't like, oh yeah, you should do this. She's like, oh, that'll kill you, blah, blah, blah. But dude, I did keto for almost 2 years. It didn't kill me. I would actually say that initially, for anybody that doesn't know what the keto diet is, for the most part is you eat like 75 to 90% of all of your macros in protein and fat. Or actually, no, it's fat. And then the rest of it is mostly protein, and then like almost no carbs.
It's like 60, 70 fat.
Yeah.
And then the rest protein and negligible carbs.
Yeah. And so I did that. And initially, when you start a diet like that, man, like your body's not used to something like that. And I was low energy for like 6-8 weeks. But then eventually my body changed how it uses energy, and it was fine. But the problem with keto for me, and why I would not recommend it to people, I mean, maybe you have to be a type person. You have to be the type of person that is okay with being inconvenienced with eating, because you have to be prepared for every single food. It's not, people are always like, oh, you can just go to any restaurant and you can get whatever and you can find something that fits it. You can't do that. You can't shop that way. Like, you have to shop a specific way, and then you're always that one guy. Like, you go to a party and like, oh, I can't eat that. Or like, hey, what are you serving? Because I don't know if I can eat there.
Yeah, then they got to do the mental prep. Oh, Jay's coming over. We got to have bacon and sausage over here for him.
Yeah, and I never wanted to be that person. So like for 2 years I did it. I was in great shape. Like, I don't think that I was in bad shape at all. I don't think that it hurt me at all. I did blood work and all that stuff. My blood work was fine. It actually did get a little bit tiny better with my my fat levels, or my triglyceride levels and stuff. Those got better. But it's not something I would recommend unless you're that person who's like, I'm just want to live a lone wolf life where no one else does what I do, and I'm just gonna just do this one thing.
Yeah, but here's the thing though: when you do go into that, and I remember you did this before, but you weaned off it a little bit. Like, you go into this phase of like, oh, I can eat this. Like, I'm gonna have bacon, cheese, and all this stuff. But like, you got to remember, like, you still have to somewhat balance everything you're taking in when you're going to that type of diet. Like, you can't just make an excuse like, oh, I can have this and that, and I'll get away with it, you know, because a lot of people go into that ketogenic mindset of like, I can have these high fatty foods, and you can, but it's got to be dispersed still a little bit. Like, if you're just having bacon, cheese, burgers, steaks, and it's okay to a point, but you got to still spread the variety a little bit. You know, a lot of people like to have that tendency to, you know, fulfill their needs in the moment. And you do see a lot of people come into the ketogenic dietary lifestyle when it's convenient for them. And this goes for everything, you know, like sometimes you're like, oh, I don't want to have a high carb diet. And then you kind of motion towards having like a higher fatty diet just for a little bit, just to get the urge out.
I think here's the reason why people do keto, and it's not because they think it's some sort of miracle thing. It's because it's, for the most part, simple. Like the directions are simple, and the outline is simple. I think most people would do a different, like if they had a diet plan where it's given to them and it's outlined and it's well, like, hey, here's the definition of what you should be doing, then they can stick to it. But when someone says to you, and I'm sure you've either said this to someone at some point or have been told this by somebody, because we all do this. Hey, just get your macros correct, eat these specific things, and then like that's it. Like, hey, or you throw out these numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 40, 40, 20. And they're like, huh? Like, what does that mean? So like for you, if you're like, let's say you're programming for somebody.
Yeah.
What do you do to make it simple for them and understandable, and a guideline where they're like, oh, I can do that and I can stay within those guidelines?
Well, you have to start where anyone's at, right? So if you're just getting into fitness, they're not going to know what macros are. They're probably going to barely know what calories are. You know, they're going to kind of understand like, oh, if I eat this amount, I lose weight. But do you actually know how much you're eating within that amount? So again, start where everyone's at. If you're just getting into fitness, you kind of want to go by the fistful method. So you teach people to eat by the what they call it, the my plate. I believe what the government standard was. You go over the fistful of protein, and you have like a side of carbs, like maybe 30% of your plate is carbs, 40% of your plate's vegetables, and the other part's like meat, some sort of meat product in there. So that's the easiest way to get someone started. Like, hey, have a well-balanced meal 3 times a day, 4 times a day, and then you can kind of motion your way to other things. You know, then you can start counting calories and macros, and you have to do a little bit of explaining at that point, because still, like if you tell them like, hey, I want you to set up your plan for, let's say, 30% protein, 50% carbs, and then 20% fat, you know, they're still not going to know exactly, you know, what proteins, fats, and carbs are. You're just kind of telling them to do something they don't know about, right?
Yeah.
So you have to explain things, make it simple for them.
In what you're saying is making it simple for them, because if you say, hey, you need these proteins, these carbs, and then these fats, you also have to actually tell them sometimes, like, hey, stay within these foods, because hey, this food has this amount of protein. Because people don't like, whenever someone asks me, and I want to give them an easy answer, I just say, hey, get an app that tells you foods macros, and then you know generally what that food will give you, and then you can appropriately, like, unfortunately, hey, it's going to get dull for a little bit because you're going to eat the same thing to stay consistent. But then once you get that, then you just add one more thing to it. Oh, I can have this as my protein. Oh, I can have this as my carb, or I can have this as my my fats. You know, generally guide them down like a list of like, hey, here's the general foods, and then as you see things that'll fit that macro well, add those or take something else out. Cottage cheese is one of those things that everybody eats, and they're like, oh, this is the perfect macros, but I hate cottage cheese. It's it's a texture thing for me.
Yeah, it's gross. But yeah, you can also bring people towards meal plans if you want to do that too. And then kind of how I like to lay it out for all clients, that if they ask for a meal plan, we'll get them a meal plan started. I do like to list out macros and calories per meal and for the overall plan itself. Just you're kind of aware, like, okay, this is around this many calories for this meal, and you kind of know that going down the whole line of the list there. And from there, they kind of get an idea to kind of build upon that. Like, okay, I'm having an average of 40 grams of protein each meal here. Where's my protein source? You know, chicken, right? So I'm getting about 300 grams of chicken. I'm right around 50 to 40 grams of protein this. And you have like 200 grams of carbs. And then from there, you kind of just count out your carb sources. How does that look from that layer? And that's helped for a lot of clients to kind of like break down how much they're actually eating.
Do you schedule a certain meal caloric intake? Because I know from day to day, like if you don't work out in a day, you're going to have less. And if you do work out in a day, you're going to have a little bit more. But do you also specify it for like, hey, if you work out in the mornings, this is when your bigger meal should be, versus if you work out at night, this is when your big meal should be? Do you go into that detail with them?
I think it comes down to prioritizing what's your most extensive part of the day. Like, where are you going to be more taxed? You're not going to be as taxed sitting down working on the desk the rest of the day, right? So you probably have your lower carb meals during that time. But when we actually need the carb sources, you want to plan that around the actual workouts. Because if your workouts aren't the toughest part of your day, there's a problem, right? So anyways, we'll probably do 60 to 70% of the carbs around that workout window. So that includes your pre-meal, post-workout training meal, and then maybe a little bit of intra carbs there to kind of fill that out. But I think the most important thing is you want to feel the workout. We don't want to feel the rest of the day the same way we would feel the actual workout itself.
So should people have like a different relationship with food in terms of like, hey, they should see protein as the thing that sustains you throughout the day and fuels your muscle, and then see carbs more as like, hey, when I work out, this is what's going to actually like as more as fuel. Like, so like protein as a sustenance and then carbs more as a fuel rather than like feeding you as a general food.
I think it's all relative to the person. I mean, most people kind of think in that sense anyway, like, okay, carbs, if you're not moving around, don't have carbs. You kind of have this idea that if you're not eating carbs, you don't have to move as much and all that. But we definitely do want to think more along the lines of prioritizing where we're going to be more active during the day. So usually I like to use quick carb sources, things on the low glycemic scale. It's like white rice, cream of rice, rice cakes. I like rice, but things that they're going to digest very well and very quickly, very rapidly. And with that time, you probably have a lower amount of protein. Again, like what you're saying, we want to fuel the rest of the day with, an even amount of protein to kind of keep yourself satiated, keep that protein synthesis going around the rest of the day like clockwork. Around this time, you really don't want to have a lot of fats as well. Again, we're trying to prioritize good training. When you have more fats and then higher protein, it's going to take a longer time to digest. So that's not the best thing to happen while you're trying to train.
What about the myths of like, oh, you got to have your 50 grams of protein right after you work out? Like does the timing, like how much does timing, in your opinion, like matter in your training, but then also training other people?
Yeah, so I mean, protein synthesis occurs 48 hours after training. You're still going to have this high uptake of protein 48 hours after that particular training session, right? So I don't remember where that protein myth came from, but like they always said, like, hey, you got to get a shake in after the workout. My guess is the supplement companies, because they're always trying to make money, But and it's cool to have protein shakes, but I mean, you don't have to have it like, hey, I got to get in this 30-minute window, right?
Yeah.
I think we've all done that. I used to do that all the time in high school. I'd be rushing in the car. I'm like, hey guys, I got to get my protein real quick. I'll be right back. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is like, hey, just make sure you're getting your total daily protein within, whatever's convenient for you throughout the day.
What, like for me, I don't know. I don't want to put it just to genes. I'm not someone that overeats. Like I don't really enjoy eating. So if I have a good meal, like I love when food tastes good, obviously. But I'm not someone that's like, ooh, I just can't wait to like. I'm not rubbing my hands like waiting for like a specific meal or like food or anything like that. So I'm not one that tends to overeat. So like, I can't identify with people that are like, oh man, it's a struggle for X, Y, Z. But I'll tell you this much: it is a struggle. I can identify with hard gainers. Like if you're a hard gainer, man, I hear you, because it is not an easy thing to do. For me to even gain weight, I had to just completely cut out all cardio and just lift. And so basically what that did was, like what you're saying, I only fueled my workout only, and that's it, and not for extra activities throughout the day, because I couldn't eat that much. So if I was eating more, like if I wanted to continue to do that cardio, I would have to up my calorie intake to gain weight. And I think people just have to decide, okay, well, what's cost effective for me? Do I have enough money to do a bunch of cardio and lift weights and still gain muscle? Or do I even have enough time? Because some people are like, oh, you eat 5 to 7 times a day? I don't have time to meal prep or make that many meals. And if you can only have 3-4 meals in a day, you just have to change your diet based upon, time, convenience, and how much actual physical activity you're deciding to do.
Yeah. Everything has to be based off of your actual schedule. So that's why we say no plan should be the same, because again, work hours are going to decide like when time you could train, how much you can eat in a day, what type of work you're actually doing. If you're a construction worker, you're definitely going to be eating a lot more than the average person because you're moving around. Yeah. You're getting a lot more steps, a lot more physical activity than the average desk worker, right? So I think that needs to be taken more seriously across the board for a lot of people when they first get into fitness, because you tend not to think about that stuff. You tend to, and like we talked about in the first podcast, you tend to look at your fitness celebrity. You want to follow their plan, their training regimen, but that might not work for your lifestyle.
Yeah.
So it's about bringing everything relative to you. Yeah. So if you're working all day, hey, you're going to have to meal prep. You're not going to have the time to, take a break from your work, go to your kitchen, start cooking the fresh food. A lot of us are kind of blessed to do that, but if you have to meal prep, you got to make it happen. For a lot of the hard gainers we're talking about, they say they're eating enough. Like, hey, I'm eating all the time, man. I swear I'm eating so much. And then what's the answer we always give them is like, hey, you need to eat more because it's not working.
Yeah. I think hard gainers have the same thing that like I have, where your body gets to a certain point where it's ate enough and it's like, okay, I'm just done. Like I can't. And I remember just having to force feed myself like to gain weight. To be honest, for those of you out there that are trying to like gain weight and you're just eating everything, like allow the process to be slow. Because if you try and rush it and eat like 4,000 calories and you're only $150 and you're eating that much, you're going to gain a lot of fat. That's going to be harder to lose later on. Like it's good to be like in a surplus and gain a little bit of fat weight. But man, I legit, like you said in the last podcast, my stomach just went kind of out, but I was big, but like I looked more like a, I don't know, not even a power lifter. I was like just under, well, hold on. I'm not trying to offend people because there's power lifters out there that look at bodybuilders, but the typical power lifter is the look that I had. And you just don't want, if you're trying to be aesthetic, don't overeat and make it harder for yourself when you try to cut, because cutting is harder than keeping the weight off in the first place. Yeah.
Break things down to a science, because if you're not counting everything, you don't know exactly what's going in your body. Where do you know where to go? If you're trying to lose weight and you're still not counting, how do you know how many calories you need a day to actually cut weight, or how many you need to actually bulk up? So I think, again, it goes back to the hard gainers. A lot of them don't like to count calories, don't like to count how much protein, fats, and carbs they're eating. You're going to have to do that. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck, on that plateau you've been hitting for the past 3 months, 6 months, a year.
Yeah, we're talking not just bodybuilders. We're talking any athlete. You're out there playing football and you're trying to perform to the optimal athleticism. You got to eat. You can't just be lightweight. I mean, you're going to end up being, just a safety all the time, or like a wide receiver. But if you're trying to be somebody that has some weight, if you want to be that guy that's the hit stick, or you want to be the enforcer on your hockey team or your basketball team or whatever it is, you got to eat. So we're not just saying, hey, to be a bodybuilder and put on muscle and size, this is what you need to do. This is also, just athletes in general. If you want to be athletic, the muscle is what makes you athletic. Obviously, like flexibility and mobility too, but like the muscle sometimes helps you be more flexible, because then you can flex your body in a certain way because your muscle is helping you pull that tension. But
bringing it back to overall diet, I mean, man, you ever just think about something and then it just disappears out of your head?
Yeah,
that happens to me a lot lately.
Yeah, I see that. What are some mistakes that you made when you first started and you didn't have a coach? Like, what were the first things or your ideas of like, oh, this is what I need to do, that were counterintuitive to you to gaining weight?
Yeah, so,
or not necessarily gaining weight, but having a good diet.
I think it's a funny topic for me, because like I never thought of what I did as having a good diet. I thought of it as like, hey, I need to eat this to get the result I want, right? So when I first started bodybuilding, like I looked up Kai Green. Kai Green's eating 8 ounces of protein every single meal, right? For 8 meals, I think it was. So I mean, this guy's doing 400 grams, 500 grams of protein,
and he walked around with that backpack with all that food in it all the time.
Yep. I had meals that I didn't keep in a cooler bag. I kept that in my truck waiting for me to eat. I didn't know about food poisoning back then, but but I was eating that guy's diet. But I was like, hey, he's big. I want to get big. Let me follow that plan. When I first got into, let's say, carnivore, I think carnivore was the biggest one for me. I was looking for a result. I had this skin issue that just kept on flaring up, and the only thing I could think of is like, what's in my diet right now? So I had to bring everything down to just meat for a little bit, and I was reading upon that. And then that's when I also got into fasting as well, because I couldn't survive alone just on meat, a high-fat steak. I kind of needed to cut that eating window down a little bit too.
What kind of fasting are we talking about? Because there's the fasting where some people eat one meal a day. Some people have like a 4-hour eating window. Like, what type of fasting are you talking about?
I did it all. I think the first time I ever fasted was a 4-day period, just to see how long I could go.
But, okay, so you're saying fasted. Again, you got to explain that to people, because they're like, did you just eat nothing? Did you eat like...
All right, so, well, it's going to be purely a food fast. So that means no eating any food.
For 4 days straight.
4 days straight. No food, just water. I think I put a little bit of salt in the water just to have some electrolytes in my body, so the workouts didn't drop off completely. But yeah, that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, mentally, physically. Couldn't be around a lot of people. I was grumpy all the time for at least the first 2 days.
I bet.
And then it kind of balanced off a little bit. But then, I remember I was walking by, 7th and Dolores. This is back in Monterey, in the Carmel area. And then all I could smell was the food, and that was it for me. I needed to go in and get some food.
So that's crazy though. Like, so what caused you to do that? And then how did you feel during that time of just fasting in general? Like what made you oh, let's just see how long I can go?
I think when you first start anything, you pretty much feel like crap. You're not good at it, right? So you tend not to feel the best that you could possibly feel like other people do when they say they fast. Like, oh, I feel great. I've been doing this for a while now. You won't feel like that when you first start doing it. I didn't feel like that until the 3rd or 4th day, like I mentioned. And even then, it didn't feel too great. So I dropped it off to that 24-hour fasting period. Sometimes I'd bring it down to 18. And that's when I really started feeling a lot better, because I could have that, the 1 meal a day, the OMAD method. And that's when carnivore was really beneficial to me as well, because then I would just have 1 meal full of a ribeye, maybe 2 ribeyes, some eggs, some bacon here and there. And I did that for a bit. But as far as the fasting went, the prolonged fasting really took a toll on my body, because I was still trying to bodybuild. And
those two things don't go together.
Yeah, they don't go together. You can lose weight and you can lose muscle doing fasting, but you can't bodybuild in fasting.
Yes.
Doesn't matter how much protein you're having, you're not going to reap the benefits that you would if you were eating all the time.
I did intermittent fasting, and I'll tell you, again, like what we talked about before, it was more out of it worked well out of convenience. Yeah. I didn't have to worry about food. My first half of the day, I didn't eat until 2 o'clock, and then I ate a very light lunch at that point, and then I ate a big dinner. That's how I did it, or maybe it was the other way around. But anyways, I only ate 2 meals a day, and then that was it. I ate no snacks, no nothing in between, and I did feel really good. But come to think of it, now that I think about it, I do kind of enjoy having food in my stomach, not eating necessarily. Yeah. Because, but once I got to that point where that was consistent, where I didn't eat from 8 o'clock at night until 2 o'clock the next day, I was fine. And actually, no, it was probably like less than 8 o'clock, probably like 6 o'clock. So I ate like at 2 and at 6, and then that was it.
I think once you do go through like that period of fasting, it gives you a new appreciation for food, because you realize how much you hate life without food, right? You're like, oh man, I can't wait to eat. So like for you said you didn't like food earlier. Like I think that really changed that around for you.
Yeah, just right now, just the light bulb went on. I was like, wait a second, maybe I do like food because I know what it's like not to have it. Mm-hmm. I think for me, like when I was younger, I used to eat everything. I don't know if Mileplex is still a thing, but that was one of like the meal replacement things that I took.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, it was like a EAS brand or EOS. I don't remember what the brand, but it's called Mileplex. Yeah. And it was like a meal replacement. So I ate a meal, I ate that in between the meal, and then I ate a meal again, and then I had it twice a day.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't gain no weight, man. Some of those, here's the thing, if we could talk to anybody out there about supplements, they're great. Like some of them work, some of them are really good, but that's the whole point though. They're supplements. They're secondary to food. So if you can get your hands on real food, like a lot of veggies and quality meats, and then, you know, like what you said, easy digestible carbs, you're going to do a lot better than if you have 50% of your diet on supplements. Mm-hmm. I remember I would drop, you know, like $200-$300 a month on, okay, don't laugh, it's the worst brand ever, but Muscle Tech, like, just, you know, hey, if you want to sponsor me, you want to sponsor me, but like, hey, I don't care about no Muscle Tech.
And no one's going to blame you. Phil Heath was sponsored by Muscle Tech for that time.
Yeah. And it was, it didn't do anything. Like I thought that it did, but the placebo part about a diet is, oh, I'm taking this, so I have to work out. So you end up working out harder because you're like, oh, I spent money on this, I don't want it to go to waste. So it makes it feel like you are benefiting from it, but it's more like, it's a placebo of like, oh, this is in my body, so I should be getting stronger.
Yeah. I think that's the funniest thing, because I remember, what is it? Carnivore, I think that was the brand. I think they're still around. But I used to do their, what is it, their hard gainer supplement that they had? Or no, actually, it was Muscle Tech. It was Muscle Tech.
See?
I took the hard gainer stuff. So I took theirs, and I was like, oh, I'm going to gain a lot of weight from this. And then I realized, like, I'm staying the same weight. What's going on? And then I started looking at the back, and this is where macros and calories came into play for me. I looked at the back, and I was like, hey, I'm only having like a half of a serving on this thing. And I thought I can make it last, but in reality, like, if I want to get big, I need to have more calories. So then I started taking the full serving, and then I realized there's only 7 servings in the whole bag, and I'm like, I'm getting ripped off right now. I can just have regular food.
Optimum Nutrition is the protein that I use today. It's the best on my stomach, and it's the one that doesn't like taste horrible. But I was going to get their mass gainer, and then when I looked at the macros, once again, I looked at the back because I wanted to see what I was getting. All it is the protein, but it's just double scoops. I don't know whether they changed it now, but all it is it's just more scoops of the same product.
Yeah.
So like
all mass gainers are just a meal replacement, like a big meal replacement.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Usually you're around like 100, 200 carbs for it, and then 25 to 50 fat. So
yeah, in
reality, it's not even a protein shake. It's just, you know, a meal.
Yeah, it's just like a blended up, powdered up meal that you eat. And that's why, again, I go back to saying, like, absolutely, if you're get like a dietitian or a personal trainer or somebody that knows what they're talking about, or someone that has personal experience with it, get them to tell you, hey, here's the general foods. I mean, you could Google this stuff. There, like, people, if you have questions about these things, well, I don't know, because Google will give you a lot of random stuff. But find someone that you trust, someone that's well vetted into fitness and has like clients or some sort of degree. Get like a general meal plan from them, but like stick to like as much real foods as possible, because that translates more into just real gains, whether it be athleticism or muscle.
But here's the thing: you could talk to who you want, and you can listen to them. Like, you will get some benefit out of it. But the best thing you can do is still try it for yourself.
Yeah.
Because you'll always go back wondering, like, oh, maybe I could have done this and I would have done a lot better. That'll always stick in your head. Yeah. Like, even if you hire a coach, there's always thoughts running in the back of your head, like, maybe I should try this before I did went this direction. Like when I did carnivore, when I did keto for a little bit, fasting, intermittent fasting, and then I did the OMAD for a bit. Like, if I didn't do any of that, I would always kind of like wonder, like, maybe this could have helped me, maybe it couldn't have. But that thought process always runs through the back of my head, because if you don't try it yourself, you'll never know what it's actually like.
So if you're going to recommend to somebody to try something, what's the time frame where you say, okay, you really gave it a good try?
It depends on the person, because at least 2 to 3 weeks, for everybody, because then you kind of get a baseline of like, hey, how does this fit my schedule, my daily life? And then you kind of see like whatever benefits or negatives you have with your body, you'll be able to see that in that period of time. But as far as like how long to do it for, I did each of mine for at least 3 months. 3 months time. So it's about 90 days. That's plenty of time to see, or to like stop or keep going. Have that check mark to know what's kind of going on.
I was just thinking about what you're saying. When you find a celebrity that's doing whatever it is that you want to do and you try it. There's a guy doing the carnivore diet, and he was like on the first 2 weeks, and he said, "Man, every single time I use the bathroom is just straight diarrhea. Like that's all I do." And I'm like, "Dang, your body needs something. It's missing something. If your body's doing that, then you already know. You don't need to go further than 2 weeks. That your body needs something else."
Yeah, like that'll happen for a lot of people, but it's what's supposed to happen is you have like little pellets of poo. Like you see deer poo, that's what your poop should look like, because you're absorbing basically everything you intake. There's no fiber that's going to end up being roughage and ended up excreting from your body. You should be able to digest almost everything from like steaks, eggs, bacon, whatever in that carnivore diet.
All right, so if you're going to give some sort of like general, like, hey, here's the general rule, here's what I recommend for somebody, what would that be?
The easiest thing, the best thing is to always count your calories, count your macros, know what that is, and go from there. Because that is probably the easiest thing you can do as far as a person get guaranteed results. You can say like, oh, I'll do keto, oh, I'll do intermittent fasting, I'll do carnivore. But if you don't know exactly what you're intaking, you don't know what direction you're going to go in. You don't know how to cut. You don't know how to put on weight. You would only have a brief disguise of what you could have. I think you should also try everything at some point too. Like you can put the macros and calories to the side, but try other things, and then you'll realize like, hey, what I was doing first really works. You know?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Like if you're going to try something, be as close to 100% into it as you can. Because if you're like doing it, that whatever that type of diet or that meal style of eating is only 80%, then you're not doing whatever it is that it's prescribing for you to do, and you're not truly doing it. So like give it a full 100%, like all in, however much time, 2 to 3 weeks. But then, like you said, I would say try something else to see, oh, my body worked differently. Oh, my workouts were different, or I slept better. I don't recommend anybody, even if you like, let's say you eat one way and you're getting quote unquote good results from it, like what you just said, what if there's something else that will give you better results, but you're used to this? Now that you found out that you have the discipline to do one type of eating, well, you can do the discipline with some other type of eating. Just try it out. Do it for a month. It's not going to be the end of your life if you just do it for 1 month and let's say you get worse. Okay, so then now you're justified in that what you're doing before was better for you. And so you can tell someone, oh, no, I just personally wouldn't do that because it didn't work for me. It might work for you, but it didn't work for me.
Yeah. I'm a person who likes to experiment. So this is why I did what I did, before hiring a coach, checking out all these different food routines, dietary plans. But if you're a person that wants to save time, like you're hiring someone to reap the benefit of saving time, then just go with the macros and calories, whatever they say as a coach, personally. That's the easiest thing you can possibly do.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'm glad you joined us on our discussion on diet. As you can see, we're in my gym. We're in the mezzanine today because I don't want to set up the whole podcast inside of the gym and then break it down and work out and then set it back up again. So this is where we're at today. And then we're building out the podcast studio. So hopefully in the next 2 or 3 episodes, we'll be in there. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for hanging out. And we'll see you. You'll hear us in the next podcast.